Mi'kmaq territory, and Catherine agreed that I can say a few introductory words.
You told me.
I said I was told to introduce you. Are you okay with it?
Keep it short.
Keep it short. It's very short. Cathy Martin is a member of the Millbrook First Nation. She is an internationally recognized film producer and director and a pioneering Mi'kmaq filmmaker. She's the recipient of numerous awards, including the Wave Award for Women in Film and Television Atlantic in 2015, and the 2021 Portia White Prize. There are others. A writer, community activist, teacher, and drummer, she has contributed to policy and institutional change to enrich the arts and culture sector by making them more accessible to Indigenous artists. In 2017, Catherine was made a member of the Order of Canada for her outstanding contributions to film and education. Catherine is a past holder of the Nancy's Chair in Women's Studies at Mount St. Vincent. She's currently Director of Indigenous Community Engagement at Dalhousie University and unofficially at King's, and a member of the Board of Governors at King's. But she's much more than a member of our board. She's a great and generous friend of King's, treasured member of our community, and a kind and patient advisor to its president and administration. Catherine, over to you.
I love the part when you take it off just when you're at the mic. You're not. Medawaloktiok. Auntie? My auntie's there. I have to be really careful with my language. My Auntie Florence was my first nanny. Yep, she was there for me when I was little. Yeah. Medawaloktiok, welcome to all of you. Welagiskuk, yes? And Nin Gadalinan Maltai. My name is Cathy Martin, and I'm a member of the Millbrook Mi'kmaq community, which is part of the Mi'kmaq Nation. So all those little communities from Newfoundland down to Maine, over to Quebec, they're all one nation. And the communities are the communities. I love to tell people that because it bugs me. It does, that every community is not the nation. We're all one. That's been something government's been trying to get us to do, is divide ourselves, and I just won't do it, so. It's an honor today to honor a good friend of mine and many, many, many people. But I also want to especially honor his wife for putting up with this person. Pat. They told me I'm supposed to speak, so I'm saying a few words and that I'll be done. I'm over. Except that Dan Paul has been, like my uncle, he probably is my uncle, but he's been my good friend of my family, of my parents, and of many, many Mi'kmaq around our nation. And of course, across the world, he's become a friend and sometimes an enemy with this book of his. I just like that it's the 4th edition. It's like he's not going to give up, no matter what you don't like about it. It's not our history he's writing about, it's the history that was done to us that he's writing about. So he's been writing a lot of relations, righting a lot of wrongs, and telling our side of the story, which is something we have to do for the next 500 years, is only hear our stories. Because we should get 500 years of that storytelling, I think. Anyway, King's College is a beautiful place, and they've done some beautiful work, especially, recently they're doing all kinds of great things and starting a cohort for Indigenous journalists, and those are the real parts of truth and reconciliation. I have to say, we've sat around all kinds of places getting called in to tell people about the TRC calls to action. But I think it's time now to stop talking about it and actually read them and pick one to take with you and use for the next 500 years. Sarah Denny, like many of the elders that I've been privileged to be taken in by, first my auntie, but then over the years I've been honored and been gifted with such kindness from my aunties and uncles, Emsit Nogama. That means we're all related, and I think we are. I think I haven't met anyone that's not related to me. So Sarah Denny was a woman who was committed her life to bringing back our culture, our traditions, our language, and encouraging all of us to sing and to dance and to do the things that she remembers. She carried the culture and of ancient history in her heart and in her soul until it was kind of okay. I don't think it just was like someone said, okay, everyone, Mi'kmaq and Indigenous, you can now speak your language and sing and dance. I never heard that. But there was a time around 1960 after we were given the right to vote. 60-ish, Danny? He can't hear me very good, but. So we were allowed to vote in our own country after almost 500 years. She taught me to sing, to share my gift, and to share it. And she taught me about when to sing the chants, when not to sing them. And I think a lot of people are missing that part of the knowledge. So you can't just go around singing. You can, but not particular chants. And I can welcome you to the unceded territory of not only the district that my relatives are from Chibuktuk all the way, well, it's far. But I also can welcome you because Grand Chief Ben Sillaboy told me, if I'm not around, Cathy, you can do it. And so did Frankie Nevin. They said, no, you do it. I can't get there. So I welcome you all to the unceded territory of our ancestors and of us today. And I thank them for holding the line, as they say, holding it and walking forward in front of us so that today, like in Truro, I was just there and I jumped on my broom to get here, but I was in Truro and I was there last year for the first TRC walk, and I was shocked then. And then this year, it was double, and there was well over 1,000 people, all of all places, children, all wearing orange. And that's TRC in the works, is actually doing something about it. And I loved watching the children. They didn't need to know anything. They knew already when the honor song was sung, all the children stood up. Nobody told them. And so I think we're on our way. And those little kids, the ones that were lost and just, finally found, even though we knew where they were, they're the ones that are leading us now. They're the ones, those little children, the ones that were murdered by the Canadian government and the churches and hidden. They are finally full of happiness because we found them, and we're going to make sure that never, ever will this ever happen again anywhere in the world. So with that, I ask Danny Paul, Daniel, Dr. Paul. I always just know him as Danny. He's one of those that moved forward and held the line and walked in the front and received ridicule constantly over this book that he wrote. And so he started leading us through the truth, and people didn't want to hear the truth. But I acknowledge him for his courage and for inspiring me and for coming by my side when I had very difficult times. And I think he's probably done that for many. So Sarah said, you sing this chant whenever we gather as nations. We also sing it for everything we celebrate, but in particular, you sing this chant, and she learned it on a wax cylinder and asked Grand Chief Donald Marshall if she, in the 60s, if she could begin to sing these chants again. And he said yes, and the Grand Council, who are the ones that should be leading us, said, yes, Sarah. Even though these songs were sung by men on these wax cylinders, Sarah kind of was a bit of an activist, and she kind of got the women to step up to the plate, and that's what we do. People often say the women out east have songs, and they drum. And it's not really, the way, but it is our way. And I thank Sarah for that, and Danny, and I want to honor all those who have gone before us when I sing this. It's not something you need to understand. It's a chant, and it brings all those who have gone before us together with us today. And not just the Mi'kmaq, but your own. You might think of somebody in your life that you really wish you could have a good sit down with. And so you just ask them to come here today and to help us to do the work we want to do. So the drum represents the heartbeat of Mother Earth and the heartbeat of our mother. And when we sing and we drum, we're speaking from our hearts, which is the first language, the language of our mother, our very first grandmother, who taught us to only speak from our hearts. And when you speak from your hearts, everybody in the world can understand us, because it's not only the first language, it's the truth, because it's your mother's language. Guano de, guano de, guano de, guano danahi, guanalia, guano danahi, guanalia, guano danahi. Guanalia, guanode, guanalia, guanode, guanalia, guanoda. Ego, igane, ego, igana. Guanalia, guanodanahi, guanalia, guanodanahi, guanalia, guanode, guanalia, guanode, guanalia, guanoda. Guanalia, guanodanahi, guanalia, guanodanahi, guanalia, guanode, guanalia, guanode, guanalia, guanoda. say that. Ready? Daho! And now I get to tell you about an hour's length of who this person is. No, I won't, no. But another good friend, and I also wanted to welcome Pam into this particular territory, and thank you for all the work you do. Neda?
Thank you, Cathy. So I am Bill, and I'm the president of the University of King's College. And it was suggested that in response to the welcome to the territory, it was appropriate for the university to provide a land acknowledgement. So on behalf of all the students, faculty, and staff of the university, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this event, and especially to welcome our guest of honor, Mi'kmaq Elder and Distinguished Author, Dr. Daniel Paul. The book we are here to recognize and celebrate, We Were Not the Savages, lays out the history of Nova Scotia that was untold before it was told by Dr. Paul. We have been granted the privilege of co-hosting the launch of the 4th edition of this seminal book, an event that has been timed to occur on the second National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. So we are full of gratitude for that privilege. I will acknowledge that we gather today on unceded Mi'kmaq land, but in doing so, I wish to begin by acknowledging that as an institution founded in 1789, King's was established during the very years when the peace and friendship treaties of the previous 6 decades began to be ignored and systematically disregarded by the Crown and by the people and the government of Nova Scotia. As Nova Scotia's first university by 30 years, and the only one to be commissioned by a royal charter, the University of King's College directly and immediately benefited from colonial Nova Scotia's abandonment of its treaty relationship with the Mi'kmaq. The university also missed the opportunity as a university that styled itself of the governing elite of settler society to stand up for these treaties and the vision of mutually respectful relations and friendship between Mi'kmaq hosts and settler guests those treaties embodied. Instead, it was part of the implementation of the doctrine of discovery that, as Dr. Paul's book shows, sought to erase Mi'kmaq rights, culture, knowledge, and history. In 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission published its 94 calls to action, many calling for action on Indigenous access to and indigenization of post-secondary education. Here, too, we must acknowledge that King's has been slower to respond to those calls to action than other universities, especially considering the calls to action stress the particularly important role journalism and media education must play if reconciliation is to be advanced and achieved. King's was also slower than other universities in consistently acknowledging our location on unceded Mi'kmaq land and the comprehensive ways in which we benefit from that land and the treaties that made our very creation as a university possible. So we are coming to understand, now that we have a building tradition of land acknowledgement, that acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, on Mi'kmaq land, is not enough. Acknowledgement must become tangible, difference-making action. And our recently announced launch of a cohort initiative for Mi'kmaq students who wish to study journalism at King's, combined with a range of increased supports for them and all Indigenous members of our community, is our most substantial step so far in becoming a place that lives its land acknowledgments. Now, this is only a beginning, and there's much, much more to be done than has been done. We know that we are still in the early stages of building meaningful mutual relationships with Mi'kmaq and other Indigenous communities. And that is why we're so grateful for Daniel Paul's presence at this event and his continued willingness to share his knowledge and wisdom here at King's. We will continue to listen to Mi'kmaq voices in moving forward to become a university that not only does its part, but is changed by the reconciliation process. And here I would like to acknowledge colleagues Ann Silboy, Sheila Isaac, Cathy Martin, and King's professor Trina Roach, who pushed, educated, and guided us in the development of our initiative for Mi'kmaq students interested in journalism. And acknowledge Professor Roach again and King's graduate Duncan McHugh, who guided us in the prior creation of our course, Reporting in Mi'kmaqi. So it is in this context, not just of recent history, but 230 years of history, that I acknowledge with humility and gratitude that King's is situated on unceded Mi'kmaq land in Shabuktuk and in Mi'kmaqi. I acknowledge also that from this fact and the treaties that apply to everyone in this territory, we have a responsibility and also a unique opportunity to contribute to reconciliation and to be accountable for doing so. Thank you to Fernwood and my colleagues, Dr. Dorota Glowacka and King's Bookstore manager, Paul McKay, and to everyone who has helped to bring this event to King's. Dr. Paul, we are so honored to be your host in your land and full of gratitude to you for bringing the launch of the 4th edition of your seminal book to our university on this special day of truth and reconciliation. Thank you. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Dorota Glowacka, Dr. Dorota Glowacka, who will introduce our next special guest. Dorota, over to you.
Thank you, Cathy Martin, for your beautiful words and for your powerful welcome to the territory. And thank you, President Leahy, for the acknowledgement that this university is sitting on this land, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, and that this university is sitting on this land uninvited. I am a professor at this university, and as such, I am really grateful that this lecture hall today, on the second National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, is a site of true learning. We are grateful for that. And I am here to introduce our speaker, Dr. Pamela Palmater. Dr. Pamela Palmater is a Mi'kmaq citizen and a member of Eel River Bar First Nation, which is in northern New Brunswick. She's a well-known lawyer, practicing lawyer in the Law Society of New Brunswick. She's also a writer, an academic, an activist for historical and social justice for First Nation communities, especially for Indigenous women and children. Currently, she's holding the position of professor and chair in Indigenous governance in Toronto, or Toronto Metropolitan University. Her blog called Indigenous Nationhoods has been shared 100,000 times, and she's also been contributed to news and magazine articles. In everything she does, all of her work, she challenges settler colonial genocide in the past and ongoing. She is fierce in challenging racism and other forms of oppression. Her publications, other than her blogs, in 2011, she wrote Beyond Blood, Redefining Indigenous Identity. Then in 2015, Indigenous Nationhood, Empowering Grassroots Citizens. And then the last one is in 2020, Warrior Life, Indigenous Resistance and Resurgence. And most recently, she wrote the introduction to Dr. Daniel Paul's seminal book, We Were Not the Savages. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Palmater to King's. Thank you.
Thank you for that warm welcome. I don't know about anyone else, but are you sitting there saying, let's get to Danny, let's get to Danny. I want to hear from Danny, because that's me. He's literally one of the reasons why I'm here and why I do what I do. So if you like my work, thank Danny. If you don't, blame me. And I do think it's important that we're here on September 30th, Orange Shirt Day, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, because this is about honoring the children who never made it home, all of the families who were devastated, and Canada's unresolved genocide. Not just historic genocide, but ongoing genocide. This is a conclusion of the National Inquiry of Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls, and look at the backlash they got for saying that. But that's not the first time they were saying that. They asked me when I was testifying, do you consider what Canada's done to be genocide? And I said yes. And one of the reasons why I said yes is because one of the very first people I ever heard say that was Dr. Danny Paul. He was saying it when people wouldn't want to hear any of that stuff. He was being a voice for us when people didn't want to hear from Mi'kmaq people. He was being direct and honest and blunt and didn't soften any of the stuff that has happened or that continues to happen at a time when that might not be safe for Mi'kmaq people to do. And it is because of his work and because of his voice that he has helped inspire so many other Mi'kmaq people, especially me. And when he wrote me, he wrote me and asked me if I would write the foreword to his book. I mean, literally, this is the seminal book, not just here in Mi'kma'ki, but in this country. I almost cried. I mean, I had to say yes, of course, first, but I almost cried because I don't know that he realized just how much of an impact he's had on me, and to invite me to be part of his work that is spread throughout his life was better than anything you could ever ask for. It was like the circle coming back around. And I write about this in the foreword because when I was in university, just starting university, it was at a time when Canadians weren't aware of this. And although we still have very racist segments of society and racist segments of the government, it was even worse back then. And it was very hard going to university because when you're, say, the only Native person in a class, you're the one who is called upon to respond to every single racist question and thought and attitude that's ever been, not just by the students, but by the professor. So I had to magically and in a rush try to research everything so that I could be the answer. And one of the first books that I went to was his book, because it literally said on the cover, everything that I knew, everything that my family had taught me, everything that all of the Mi'kmaq communities had taught me, but I didn't know how to verbalize or explain. We were not the savages. We we're not the savages. There is nothing wrong with us. There's never been anything wrong with us. And genocide and the aftermath of genocide is not our fault. That alone literally changed my life, because you know it, you just don't know how to explain it. You don't have all the facts, all the details. And so in that was an immediate comfort for me, because I was always called to task, well, why don't Mi'kmaq people pick up their socks, and why aren't they responsible, and why don't they just get over it, and all of these other things. He gave me all the answers I needed to be able to survive university. And then when I went to law school and he had more additions and more additions, literally I was the first person, I'm sure, every time those books came out. I proudly have all of them with all the different covers in my house. I literally have the whole Danny Paul, We Were Not the Savages collection. And I'm very proud of that. I think that's pretty good feat. But there's truth to be told in that book. And some people might say, well, this is the 4th edition, this was published a long time ago, how is it relevant today? Well, the things that are in this book, written by Danny, researched extensively by Danny, are the things that we are only talking about now. And it's only because it's gotten recognition somewhere else. But we cannot forget the history. Long before the National Inquiry called what Canada's doing to us genocide, Danny Paul was calling it genocide, and we can't erase that history. Just like today might now be officially the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, we can't let that erase the history that it's actually Orange Shirt Day, and that it's Orange Shirt Day because of residential school survivors who brought it forward and shared their stories. So just because we get acknowledgement for something doesn't mean ever that we should erase the history of how it got there. And all of this, everything that we're doing, everything that we're talking about, all of the changes that have happened have been because of Indigenous peoples. They are the ones who've led the way, and we've been inspired by people like Danny Paul. I might be a little bit biased because he kind of looks like my father who passed away, so I might have this extra affection for him, but I don't want anyone to ever forget how significant it is that he was literally speaking out at a time when people didn't want to hear it. He was, long before any of us were doing op-eds in Maclean's or policy options, he was writing for a newspaper. I mean, he's literally groundbreaking and challenging issues people didn't want to hear. And you know how powerful and smart and wise and insightful and experienced you are when a book you wrote a long time ago is still relevant, if not more so today. And so I am beyond honored to be a part of that, because that's a forever thing. It's almost like I have evidence. If anyone ever says, oh, you don't know Danny Paul, yes, I do, look, I wrote his book. I know him, and hopefully I'll get a book with his signature on it, because he really is one of those amazing, amazing people. He has touched me so much. And you don't get that everywhere. You can go to university, like I took Native Studies, went to law school, did my master's and doctorate in Indigenous laws and policies. And sometimes you're lucky to have a professor that really speaks to you, or you learn something. But I have always found it's the people outside of those institutions, the ones who wrote the book, the ones who come and speak, the ones who share their life experience. What Danny gave me was the evidence to back up everything I knew, everything that I'd been told, but I never had the words to verbalize it, And the fact that he did that for me has come full circle. Because now when I teach in my classes, I've had Native students come up to me and say, thank you for your class. You've given me the words to verbalize what I always knew but didn't know how to explain. And I thought, that's the gift of Danny. It will literally go on for all eternity until we bring this planet back around to where it should be. And it'll be because of leaders like Danny. And I'm just literally so honored and humbled to be here with him. He's that much He doesn't like to be called an elder, but he's that and more. There's literally no word for him. And to know that everything that he does is for us. All of it. And when I say us, I mean everybody in Mi'kma'ki. He's the kind of guy, you know how there's people who say, oh, if you ever need anything, just call me and I'll be there. And like nobody ever does that, right? Like they never really mean that. With Danny, he actually means that. I can literally call him, email him out of the blue and say, oh, I have this issue. What was the history of this, this, and this? And he will take whatever time is necessary to explain it to me. And that's the kind of person he is. So know that when you're buying this book, when you're reading this book, you are literally sharing a part of his whole life. And that's precious goods. You won't get better than that. If you ever want to talk about reconciliation, understanding your history, knowing the politics, and feel like you are connected to Mi'kma'ki, that's what you're going to get out of this book. Because he updates it with everything that's happened recently. And his take on everything is literally the take of everybody else that I admire and am inspired by. If I talk to a land defender out on the West Coast, they have the same values and worldviews and vision that I learned from Danny. If I talk to an elder in Cree territory and what they want for the future, I learned that from Danny. So and I know, once you read that book, you have your guidepost. I know if ever I have a question about what is or what isn't, what I should or shouldn't consider about something, I look, what would Danny say? It should literally be a hashtag, what would Danny say? But it's literally that there are very few people in this world that I have as a goalpost. But Danny's one of the ones right at the top where I measure everything I do, everything I say or don't do against, would this be something in line with Danny's values and how he sees the world and what we should or shouldn't be doing? And for that, I will be eternally grateful. Danny, thank you for everything.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Thank you for these deeply moving words about Danny's work and life and contributions. Thank you. I am here to invite Errol Sharp, who will be introducing Dr. Daniel Paul, and also Dr. Daniel Paul's book and his life and legacy. Errol Sharp is a publisher and founder of Fernwood Publishing. He holds an MA in Atlantic Canadian Studies from St. Mary's University and is co-author of In Pursuit of Justice, Just Us, Coffee Roasters Co-op, and the Fair Trade Movement. And he's one of the editors of Milton Acorn, the People's Poet.
It's about a year ago that Danny called me up one day and he said, I want another box of books. And over the years, since we did the second edition of Danny's book, that call came regularly 2 or 3 times a year because Danny sold those books to people. Danny was a publisher's dream. And I dropped off the books to Danny's house, and he said to me, come on down, we'll have a chat. Over the years, Danny and I have got together every 2 or 3 times a year and had lunch and talked and discussed the affairs of the world, et cetera, and we had that kind of a chat. somewhere in the middle of that chat, I said to Danny, I think it's time we had a fourth edition of this book. And Danny kind of said, well, I'm 83 years of age, I don't know. And I kind of let it go. And 3 days later, Danny called me and he said, I want to do a fourth edition, I'll have it to you by the end of November. Well, Danny, like so many other authors that I've worked with over the years, didn't meet his deadline. He had it to us by the end of December. And today you have the book. I could say a lot about the book, and one of the things that I've always thought is, we talk about the title of the book, but the subtitle of the book, The Collision Between European and Native American Civilizations. I don't know how you understand that, but in my thinking, that collision was not just a conquest of land, it was not just a conquest of taking over other people. It was a collision between two different ways of life and two different ways of understanding our relationship to the world and our relationship to every other. And the title then gives us a very clear clue about who were the savages and who were not the savages. The book itself stands, I think, as a record of history, but Danny is not only a recorder of history, he's a maker of history. And that is far more important than just recording history. Danny has participated in his community. The list of things that he has participated in, the list of activities that he's been involved in would fill part of this book. One of the things that is in the book is that in 1986, Danny had a job with the Canadian government, with all of the things that go with that, a decent salary, a pension, et cetera, et cetera. Danny had the opportunity to work with some of the Mi'kmaq chiefs to set up the Confederation of Mainland Mi'kmaq. Danny quit his government job and volunteered to work to set up the Confederation of Mainland Mi'kmaq. That in itself, in my view, talks about how dedicated Danny was to his people, to the telling of the truth, to all of that. And I would like us to remember Danny as the author of this book. And one of the things that I thought when he said to me, I'll have it by the end of November, how can he do that? Well, it became obvious that Danny had been researching this stuff and never-endingly researched the material. Danny never stopped. He never just kind of went and lived on his laurels. Then he did his novel, Chief Lightning Bolt, which does talk about the differences between the two civilizations and the two ways of life. Friend, Danny has been for me a friend, a consultant, someone that I have often called on for his feedback, his opinion on a book, a manuscript, or just something that I wanted to know. And that is how I will remember Danny Paul. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Daniel Paul. Thank you.
start, I would like to thank Pam and Cathy and the president of the university and Dorothy. I never get it right. She'll kill me one of these days. Her name and I don't get along too well, but I love her. She's a great person, and thank you all for coming. I am not going to read anything from the book today. What I want to talk about is why I wrote the book. I was born in 1938 in Indian Brook Reserve, and it was a snowstorm in a little log cabin without a doctor, and we were living in abject poverty. And at the time I was born, we were wards of the Crown. We had the same legal standing in this country as drunks and insane people. And we were discriminated against openly and without any recourse whatsoever. We could not go to court. If we protested, we probably would be charged with disturbing the peace. We were a people without any recourse whatsoever. I can remember going to school, and it was being taught that we came from a savage culture, that if we wanted to succeed in life, we had to adopt the white way, which was the right way. And it built up in me and all my fellow Mi'kmaq, I would say an inferiority complex was almost incomprehensible. To try to overcome that in the years to come, it's been a burden for me and many of the people that I grew up with. Many turned to alcohol and drugs. But what turned me on and made me decide that I was going to do something about it was way back when I was about 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old. My mother and I went over to the Indian Agency. We hadn't had anything to eat for 3 days, and he made her beg for over 3 hours for a ration. And I looked at him that day at that young age, and I said to myself, when I grow up, no bastard like you is going to do that to me. And I went to school, and I always remembered being taught that Columbus was a great man, Edward Cornwallis was a great man, and so forth and so on. Well, I'd like to beg to differ with the people who put that in our history books when in the 1940s, when we were taught that crap, which was not the truth, was fairy tales. Columbus was a man who came to and got lost and landed in the Caribbean. And what he did was he loaded 3 boats with Taino people, took them back to Spain and sold them. Isabella was not, the Queen of Spain was not a hero by no means. How she raised the funds to finance that trip of Columbus was simply by disenfranchising the Muslims and the Jews of Spain at that point in time and giving them a choice: either convert to the Roman Catholic Church, leave the country, or be executed. And using the doctrine of discovery, she seized all their property and financed the trip of Columbus. And those poor Taino people that were took back to Spain were sold into slavery. That's the hero that you go into the States and you see cities named Columbus and so forth and so on. That had, somewheres along the line, perhaps they'll change that. Here in Halifax, we had a statue of Park, Edward Cornwallis. To me, that was a slap in the face every time I walked by there and saw that park and that statue. To me, it had to go. When you're looking at not only his conduct here in Nova Scotia, look at his conduct in Scotland. during the Jacobite rebellion, when him and his troops decimated the Jacobites and went through the highlands, rounding up whole families, putting them in homes, burning the homes with them inside to the ground. The man should have been shot for that. Actually, the Scottish Parliament did label it a massacre. You'll find in the new edition that I've explained how he got away with it. He was, put it bluntly, he was a great friend of the King of England, and he could get away with practically anything. But when you're looking at history, you have to look at history as it transpired, not as some imaginary thing that you should be, I don't know, making your own people look good. The Mi'kmaq were great people, and when I went to school, I left there, like I say, with a big inferiority complex that I took with me to the States. I left home when I was 14 and went to Boston, went to work. When I was around 17, I worked in a hat factory, and this black lady called me over one day, and she says, "You walk around here like you think everybody here is better than you." Says, "What do you know about your history, about your people?" And I said, "Very little." She told me, "I suggest you begin to learn about them," which I did. And by finding out about my people, I became very proud of my roots and my ancestry. When I went to school, what I was taught about the Mi'kmaq was they made great axe handles and baskets, and that was it. And that was not what the Mi'kmaq were about. The Mi'kmaq were a people who had a great civilization. Honor was the cornerstone of it. There was no want among the people. Probably in 1492, the Mi'kmaq had one of the highest standards of living in the world. There was no poverty among them. Jealousy wasn't something that they aspired to. And the name of the book is We Were Not the Savages, and you might wonder why that name is there. But I was able to, and my health ain't all that great at this point in time. Lecturing at universities, I used to start out by simply stating, let's talk about people who burned people at the stake, who drawn and quartered them, who, in many other ways, so many horrible ways to execute people. I would describe them. And then I would say, the Mi'kmaq never done that. It was done by Europeans. That's the kind of environment you lived in at that point in time. The people were ruled over in Europe by aristocratic despots, the best way to put it. When we all went to school, the older people here, you probably were taught that they were gentle people, these leaders, and what the people weren't. The people were of Europeans, most of the people, in particular England, places like that, were slaves, economic slaves. And that's a history you were not taught in school. It's about time historians had a good look at history and begin writing histories as it transpired, and get rid of the fairy tale business that we've been used to over a long, long period of time. I'm not going to talk too long because I'm running out of breath. I was diagnosed this year with lung cancer. I went through radiation treatment, and yesterday I got the good news that the radiation treatment worked, so so I hope I'll be around shooting off my face for another couple of years at least. But what I want to say to you is that the the book has changed considerably. When Earl and I had to chat about doing the fourth edition, I decided that I would do it from the front to the back, rewrite it completely. I added a lot of new material. I talk about the whippings that occurred at the Shubenacadie Residential School, and always remembered Cadet and the comment he made in that these boys that were whipped deserved what they got, the punishment that they got, and his comment that they were just emerging from barbarism. These kids were just, the barbarian was telling in his report that these kids were just emerging from barbarism. When you take boys and you put them in a barn, you tie their hands to the wall, and you use a strap that's cut in many strips on their backs, and you scar them for a lifetime. I don't think that's just punishment for any children, ever was, never will be, and never should be. This is the kind of thing that happened to our people. It's in the new edition of the book, and I'd like to emphasize that it is a new edition. Somebody told me the other day, well, I got the third edition. Well, I told him, you should read the fourth edition, because I put the finishing touches to it in the fourth edition. It's something that I think has been effective in changing attitudes in Nova Scotia, in Canada, and even in the States. I'm proud to say that the book has been used in courses in places as far away as Louisiana, and I hope that I have made a difference in this province. I think I have. I got rid of Cornwallis' name, and I have no embarrassment over that whatsoever. I always remember something a lady told me way back, an English lady. She was a well-educated person. I won't reveal her name. But we were having lunch one day, and I asked her, I said, do you think the English will ever apologize for all the barbarities that they committed around the world? And she looks at me and she says, Danny, me darling, she says, no, you'd have to convince them first that they did something wrong. Don't matter how barbarous it was. Well, I hope and pray that someday the Europeans come forward and apologize to the indigenous people of the Americas for what they did here. It's almost impossible to believe when you think about it that by the time the invasion of the Americas was over, not one civilization in South or North America was still alive and well and functioning. Destroyed the whole works, the wealth was stripped off. Then to look at the same process in Australia, Asia, Africa, the whole works around the world. I think European countries such as England, Spain, Great Britain, I should say, and France and what have you, should begin to think about writing their histories as it transpired and apologizing to the people of color around the world and non-Christians for the horrible experiences that they subjected their ancestors to. It's time for a full round of acknowledgement of history as it transpired, and time to do away with the fairy tales. One person told me we should be thankful that the Europeans came and civilized us. I shook my head and I said, I hope to God the world never gets civilized like it was in Europe in the 1492. I'll leave you with this. I read one time about 20 anthropologists in that line of work being asked if they had the choice in 1492 where they would live. Would they live in Europe or would they live in the Americas? And it was supposed to be anonymous. So they did the test, and it was 100% that these people would live in the Americas before living in Europe of 1492. So that tells you something when you're looking at history and you know history. And I would thank you for coming today, a great turnout. And I'm sorry I can't stand up here and talk too much longer. I'm running out of gas. But anyway, thank you all, and read the book, and I think you'll find its history as it transpired. You'll find it's not a fairy tale. Originally, when I was going to write the book, I was going to use verbal history, and then I thought it would be labeled BS if I did. So why not take their own history, archival history, and write it from that point of view, which I did. And in that regard, We Were Not the Savages came about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Danny. That was wonderful, and thank you for sharing your thoughts and your writing and your incredible insights into this history that we all need to learn and grapple with. Thank you. On behalf of, I'm Beverly Rock from Fernwood Publishing. On behalf of Fernwood, I just want to thank everyone for coming out today, and I especially want to thank you, Danny, for trusting Fernwood with your work, and for, you know, with all of that history, for trusting us. It means a lot, and I really thank you. Thank you, Pam. Your words are always inspiring, and I'm looking forward to your talk this evening over at St. Mary's. Thanks to everyone at Fernwood and all the folks here at King's who have made this event happen, and all your work on the book and the event, and everyone who's come out today. And especially thanks to the folks at the bookstore. And please come and get your copies. And I'm sure Danny still has a little bit of ink left in his pen for signing your books. So thanks again. Walalio.
Would you like to say?
I have a couple of books I want to present to two people that I love and admire, and I would like to call them up, and it's Pam and Cathy. Would you come up and... Make sure I give the right one to the right. Oh my, where the hell is it? Jesus, you want to open up?
You cut your nails, that's what happened.
There we are. Okay, I got it right. Pam, here's a little gift of We Were Not the Savages, new edition, all signed, sealed, and delivered, and thank you very much.
I love
Cathy? Thank you very much. And this is for Natalie. I kept telling her she's going to get it one of these days. And again, thank you very much to two lovely ladies for all they did for me, and I appreciate it mostly, and Dorothy, of course, over there. I'll rename her. I'll start calling her Dorothy, which is easier. Thank you very much.
I will invite everyone to that. We have a small reception outside so that we can continue the conversation informally. You may want to make a run for it because I hope there is enough coffee and tea for everyone. And again, thank you so much for everyone. And I hope Cathy will do us the honor of closing this event.
I know that Dan is going to sign some more. Is it here or out there? Okay. Okay, so someone should get Dan and Pat something now. No, before they eat it all. No. Dan, Helen Creighton went around and begged for recordings of different parts of our community, and one of the places she did, she took around the big recorder, you know, where you made the wax cylinders and stuff. Anyway, she went to a funeral and, you know, they said, oh, come on in. So she went in and she recorded these songs that we sing all night long. And I was trying to translate them once, and my mom was my translator. So it was late, and they were on their way to Boston the next day, and I said, Mom, I need you to translate this because I got to get it up to Helen Creighton's group. And so she said, okay. And she's, okay, turn it up. So I kept turning it up, and all of a sudden, my dad says, what the hell are you people doing out there? And we said, well, Dad, we're just working. He said, Jesus Christ, go to bed. He said, I thought I was dead. A couple of those chants I was taught, and they're from Shubenacadie, and I believe Stephen Knockwood and I believe Bill Paul, Danny's dad, were singing this, and they're having a ball, and they're not funeral songs. So I'm going to end it with those. They're quick. And then the next one was, so while they're singing, they're telling people, go over there, dance here, get your sister, do this, and they're laughing and laughing, and so this one was with sticks. Igrena, igrena, igrena.